Ethan's breath hung in the crisp evening air like tiny clouds as he wiped sweat from his brow. After months of backbreaking work, the last log was finally in place. The heart of his dream cabin nestled deep in the wilderness. He stepped back, surveying the sturdy structure bathed in golden sunset light. Surrounded by towering pines, the small clearing felt like a hidden sanctuary carved out by his own hands. No noisy neighbors, no traffic lights, no endless emails or phone calls demanding attention. Here, in the silence, Ethan could finally breathe. He pulled a heavy wool blanket over his shoulders and settled on the porch, staring up at the deepening twilight sky. A million stars shimmered overhead, unpolluted by city lights. Somewhere in the distance, a lone owl hooted. The scent of pine needles and fresh earth filled his lungs. This was freedom, pure and untouchable. For years, Ethan had dreamed of this moment. Growing up in cramped apartments, city noise always buzzing in his ears, he'd imagined a life where the only neighbors were the wild creatures of the forest. He'd worked double shifts, saved every penny, and endured endless setbacks to make this escape possible. And now, it was real. Just as he was about to step inside the cabin, the faint hum of a drone cut through the night air. Ethan froze, heart suddenly pounding. He scanned the tree line, but all he could see were shadows and swaying branches. The buzzing grew louder for a moment, then abruptly stopped. Probably just a hunter, Ethan told himself, though the unease gnawing at his gut said otherwise. He shook off the feeling and stepped inside, lighting a fire in the stone hearth. The warm glow chased away the creeping darkness, filling the cabin with flickering shadows. Ethan sank into a wooden chair, savoring the crackle of burning logs. But the uneasy silence returned. Outside the window, he thought he saw a flicker of movement, something quick, darting behind a tree. When he blinked, it was gone. He told himself again it was nothing. After all, this was the wilderness. Animals prowled in the dark. But deep down, Ethan sensed this was different. The next morning, he set out to explore the perimeter of his land, his boots crunching on frost-hardened leaves. Every snapped twig and rustling bush made him jump. He discovered strange tire tracks on the dirt road leading to his cabin, too fresh to be from forest rangers or hunters. When he followed the tracks, they led to a small, freshly cleared lot bordering his property. There, he spotted a few men unloading equipment from a van. They looked out of place, clean-cut in business-casual attire, their eyes sharp and calculating. Ethan instinctively stepped back into the trees, heart hammering. He didn't want trouble, but something told him this wasn't a random visit. These men weren't here to admire the scenery. That evening, as Ethan sat by the fire again, a letter slipped through his mailbox. A sealed envelope with a crisp HOA logo he didn't recognize. The words inside shook his world. This property falls under the jurisdiction of the Wilderness Crest Homeowners Association. Ethan read and reread the letter. It demanded compliance with new rules, landscaping standards, building permits, and annual fees. There was a notice of an upcoming meeting with a polite but firm warning that failure to comply could lead to fines or legal action. He reread the last sentence aloud, voice trembling. Your cooperation is appreciated to maintain the integrity and value of our community. Ethan stared out at the dense forest beyond his cabin, the place he had claimed as his refuge. How could this community exist here, in the middle of nowhere? And why was he only hearing about it now? That night, sleep escaped him. Outside, the drone buzz returned, closer this time, and Ethan's eyes snapped open, searching the darkness for the source. The wilderness he loved suddenly felt less like a haven and more like a cage. Ethan woke to the sharp sound of a knock. On his cabin door, the early morning light barely filtering through the thick pine canopy. His heart jumped. No one had ever come this far into the wilderness, not without warning. He wiped the sleep from his eyes and moved cautiously toward the door. Peering through the window, he saw a man in a pressed shirt and slacks, holding a bitaude thick folder. The stranger's eyes were calm, but unreadable. Behind him, a sleek black SUV was parked on the dirt road, its tires kicking up dust. Ethan hesitated but unlocked the door. The man stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Good. Morning, Mr. Lawson," the man said smoothly. "I'm Mark Grayson, representative of the Wilderness Crest Homeowners Association. I'm here to discuss your property and your obligations under our community guidelines." Ethan's stomach twisted. "I don't know anything about your HOA. This land is mine. I built this cabin myself, far from any community." Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I understand your surprise. The HOA was recently established to protect property values and maintain community standards throughout the area, including your lot." Ethan's mind reeled. Protect property values? What community? This was Wilderness. Mark slid the folder across, the rough wooden table. "Here are the documents you signed when you purchased the land." Ethan's eyes darted to the papers. He had bought the land years ago from a small broker. He remembered signing only basic deeds. This folder held pages of HOA covenants, restrictions, and bylaws, dense legal language stating that any property in the Wilderness Crest development was subject to the HOA's rules. But I never agreed to any of this, Ethan said, voice rising. "No one told me about this HOA." Mark shrugged. "The previous owners agreed on your behalf. It's standard procedure. And since the HOA was formed before you built your home, these rules apply. Retroactively, you're required to pay annual dues, maintain your property according to our guidelines, and attend meetings." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Attend meetings? This is the Wilderness. I live miles from the nearest town. And what kind of guidelines?" Mark's gaze hardened. "Landscaping standards, architectural approvals, limits on the use of generators, or water sources, things designed to maintain the area's character and safety." Ethan swallowed hard. He felt like the ground beneath him was cracking open. The conversation ended abruptly when Mark handed Ethan a thick invoice, a bill for HOA fees, overdue and accumulating. "You have 30 days to pay," Mark said coldly, "or we will have to take further action." After Mark left, Ethan sat alone, staring at the documents that felt more like shackles than protections. He reread the letter he'd received just days before, now understanding the weight behind. Its polite threats. Why hadn't anyone warned him? Who were these people taking control of the wilderness he had claimed as his sanctuary? Days passed, and Ethan's unease deepened. He began hearing rumors from passing hikers and local shopkeepers about the HOA's sudden push to develop the area. Whispers of gated communities, private roads, and restricted access. The very forest he had dreamed of protecting was being dissected and sold piece by piece. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan noticed fresh tire tracks, again. This time closer to his cabin. His dogs growled low in the shadows, refusing to settle. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a figure slipping between the trees. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, heart pounding in the growing darkness. The beam caught the glint of a camera lens peering through the branches. Ethan's voice cracked as he shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the distant crack of a twig breaking under hurried footsteps. Ethan knew then that this wasn't just a battle over paperwork or fees. Something bigger was coming, and it was coming for his dream. He locked his doors, drew the curtains tight, and stared into the night, wondering how far the HOA's reach truly extended, and what he was about to face. The morning sun filtered weakly through the mist that hung over the pine forest, casting long shadows across Ethan's cabin. Despite the peaceful appearance, Ethan's nerves were frayed. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves outside, made his heart jump. The past week had been a whirlwind of unsettling events. The letter, the visit from the HOA representative, the strange sightings. Now, there was no denying it. He was being watched. It was just past dawn when a low rumble echoed down the dirt road. Ethan stepped onto the porch, squinting through the morning haze. 2 black SUVs pulled up, their glossy surfaces almost unnatural, against the rustic backdrop of his wilderness retreat. The vehicles stopped a few yards from the cabin, and 2 men stepped out. They were sharply dressed, dark suits, polished shoes, and their expressions were unreadable masks of professionalism. Ethan's pulse quickened. These weren't ordinary neighbors stopping by for a chat. One of the men, taller and broad-shouldered, approached the cabin steps with deliberate strides. He carried a leather briefcase and a clipboard. The other stayed back, scanning the surroundings with a calculating gaze. Ethan met the taller man's gaze. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Lawson," the man said smoothly. "I'm Daniel Pierce, Executive Director of the Wilderness Crest Homeowners Association. This is Mr. Collins, our compliance officer." Ethan folded his arms. "I've already spoken to someone from your HOA. What do you want now?" Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're here to conduct a property inspection and ensure your compliance with HOA regulations." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Inspection? You mean to tell me you want to come onto my property unannounced and check if I'm compliant?" Daniel's smile flickered. "It's standard procedure. We have a responsibility to maintain community standards. It's in your best interest to cooperate." "Community standards," Ethan repeated bitterly. "You mean your control. I built this home far from the city so I wouldn't be part of any community that tells me how to live." Daniel's tone shifted, colder now. "Mr. Lawson, you signed legally binding documents when you purchased this property. The HOA has the authority to enforce rules designed to protect property values. Noncompliance results in fines, legal actions, and potentially foreclosure." Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Foreclosure? Over a cabin built in the wilderness? Daniel stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "We'll begin the inspection immediately. Please provide access." Ethan hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. He followed them outside, every muscle tense. As they walked the perimeter, Daniel pointed out areas where Ethan's cabin allegedly violated HOA codes, unauthorized structures, non-conforming landscaping, and unapproved utility setups. Ethan argued back, but Daniel dismissed his concerns with cold professionalism. Throughout the inspection, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking beneath the surface. Daniel and Collins exchanged brief, clipped conversations when they thought Ethan wasn't looking. Later, as the men packed up, Daniel handed Ethan a thick packet. "You'll find a list of required changes and a timeline for compliance. Failure. To meet these deadlines will trigger enforcement actions." Before leaving, Daniel paused at the cabin door. "Mr. Lawson, the HOA has big plans for this area. Upgrading roads, adding amenities, increasing property values. It would be wise to cooperate." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Big plans? What kind of plans?" Daniel's smile was thin, almost a smirk. "You'll find out soon enough." As the SUVs disappeared down the road, Ethan felt the weight of an invisible hand closing around his sanctuary. That night, sleep eluded him again. Outside, the drone's buzz returned, persistent and ominous. His mind raced with questions. Who were these men really? What was their true agenda? And how far would they go to force him out? He glanced at the packet Daniel had left, a carefully crafted weapon disguised as paperwork. Ethan knew the battle for his dream home was only just beginning. The following morning, Ethan sat at his rough-hewn wooden table, a mug of cold coffee, forgotten at his side. The packet Daniel Pierce had left lay open before him, its dense pages filled with rules, fines, and deadlines. But Ethan knew this was more than bureaucracy. It was a trap. He needed answers. Determined, Ethan fired up his old laptop, the only link to the outside world from his wilderness retreat. He began digging into public records, land deeds, and HOA filings. Hours slipped by as he pieced together a story far more disturbing than he'd imagined. The Wilderness Crest Homeowners Association wasn't just a community group of like-minded neighbors. It was the creation of a powerful real estate conglomerate, Crest Holdings. They had quietly bought dozens of adjoining plots over the last year, often through shell companies and anonymous trusts. Their goal: to transform the pristine wilderness into a sprawling gated community filled with luxury cabins, private roads, and exclusive amenities. Ethan's land was the last piece resisting their control, a stubborn island in the sea of Crest Holdings' expansion. The more Ethan uncovered, the darker the picture grew. The HOA bylaws were riddled with clauses designed to intimidate and force compliance. Heavy fines could be levied without warning. Meetings were controlled by Crest-appointed board members who ignored dissenting voices. There were even whispered rumors of private security hired to monitor and harass holdouts like Ethan. His blood ran cold when he found emails leaked on a local forum. Messages between HOA officials discussing strategies to pressure reluctant owners to sell or conform. Words like legal harassment, proxy votes, and quiet buyouts filled the threads. It was a ruthless takeover disguised as a community effort. Ethan's stomach knotted. He realized some neighbors, charmed by promises of increased property values and amenities, had sided with the HOA. But others, like him, felt betrayed and trapped. That afternoon, he drove to the nearest town, a small outpost nestled on the highway edge, and stopped by a dusty cafe where locals gathered. Over a cup of strong black coffee, he spoke cautiously with an older man named Carl, who had lived in the area for decades. "They're trying to turn this place into something it's not," Carl said quietly. "Wilderness turned into a playground for the rich. The HOA's just a front, a tool to squeeze out folks like you and me." Ethan nodded, grateful for the solidarity, but fearful of the uphill battle ahead. Back at his cabin, the weight of the conspiracy settled heavily on his shoulders. The HOA's polite letters and meetings masked a cold, calculated attempt to wrest control of the land. He stared out at the trees, his home, his sanctuary, now a battleground in a war he hadn't asked to fight. As night fell, Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a flickering light at the edge of his property line. Peering through the darkness, he saw shadows moving, figures carrying equipment, cameras, and notebooks. The invaders were mapping his land, documenting every inch for their plans. Ethan clenched his fists. This was no longer just about rules and fees. It was a fight for the soul of the wilderness itself. His dream was under siege. The nights grew colder, but Ethan barely noticed. His mind was consumed by one relentless thought: how to protect his home before it slipped away. One evening, as he settled by the fire, a sudden blackout plunged the cabin into darkness. The old generator had sputtered and died. Ethan scrambled for his flashlight, but even its beam seemed powerless against the thick shadow pressing in outside. A low growl rose from his dogs, tense and alert, their eyes gleaming in the dark corners of the room. Ethan's heart hammered. Someone was out there. He stepped cautiously to the window and shone his flashlight into the blackness. The beam caught a figure darting between the trees, too fast to make out any features. Footsteps crunched in the underbrush. The drone's ominous buzz returned, closer now, circling like a predator. A sudden thud against the cabin wall sent Ethan spinning. His pulse surged as he grabbed a heavy flashlight, ready to defend what was his. But the figure vanished. In the days that followed, strange things escalated. Anonymous letters slipped under the door warned of consequences for non-compliance. Notices appeared on his porch threatening hefty fines, eviction proceedings, and legal battles. Ethan's calls to the HOA went unanswered or were met with cold, rehearsed responses. The community he never asked to join was tightening its grip. Neighbors. He'd exchanged friendly nods with suddenly avoided his gaze, their silence louder than words. It was clear some had sided with the HOA's campaign, willingly or not. The isolation was suffocating. One morning, Ethan discovered tire tracks circling his cabin, too deliberate to be accidental. His dogs barked relentlessly, their growls echoing through the trees. The realization hit him hard. This was no longer a fight fought on paper. He was being watched, harassed, and pushed toward surrender. He reached out to the local sheriff's office, but the response was tepid. Private property. Disputes like this often get complicated, the deputy said. HOAs have a lot of legal power. Ethan's frustration boiled over. He was a lone man against a well-funded organization with lawyers, resources, and a plan. That night, under the stars that had once filled him with hope, Ethan sat by the dying fire, questioning if his dream was doomed. Yet, amidst the fear, a spark of defiance ignited. If this was a war, he would fight, whatever it took. Ethan's solitude was shattered that night by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unexpected. He reached for his flashlight, muscles tense, ready for an intruder. But instead of a threatening figure, a woman stepped into the dim light on his porch. She was tall, with sharp eyes that flickered with intelligence and caution. "Ethan Lawson?" she asked quietly. He nodded, heart pounding. "Who are you?" "My name's Marissa Hale. I live a few miles down the ridge. I've been watching what's happening to you, and to others. The HOA, Crest Holdings, they're moving fast and they don't care who they hurt." Ethan studied her carefully. She looked real, no sign of deceit, but trust was a luxury he could ill afford. "I'm not here to scare you," Marissa continued. "I'm here to help." Ethan lowered his flashlight slightly but didn't relax. "Help how?" Marissa glanced around, lowering her voice. "There's a small group of us. People who refuse to let Crest Holdings take over this wilderness. We've been gathering evidence, documenting their illegal tactics, and fighting back where we can." She pulled out a folder, thick with photos, documents, and recordings, proof of illegal logging permits, unauthorized surveys, and threats made to holdouts. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't just a fight for his home anymore. It was a battle against a powerful, well-oiled machine. "Why come to me?" he asked. "Because you're the last holdout on this ridge," Marissa said. "If they break you, the whole area falls." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a flicker of hope, not just from himself, but from a community fighting back in the shadows. Marissa explained how the group used covert surveillance to monitor HOA activities, gathered legal support from a scrappy local attorney willing to challenge Crest Holdings, and organized discreet meetings to plan their resistance. But it wasn't without danger. "Crest Holdings has eyes everywhere," Marissa warned. "They've been known to intimidate lawyers, spread misinformation, even sabotage equipment. Trust no one." Ethan nodded, the weight of the fight settling heavily on his shoulders. That night, Marissa helped him set up hidden cameras around the cabin, recording every visit and suspicious activity. They encrypted their communications, shared strategies, and began preparing for the inevitable confrontations ahead. As dawn broke, Ethan felt a renewed determination. Alone, he was vulnerable, but together, maybe they could withstand the storm. Yet, beneath the solidarity, a question lingered. How deep did Crest Holdings' reach go, and what lengths would they go to silence the resistance? The wilderness around Ethan's dream home had transformed into a chessboard, each move fraught with risk, every shadow a potential threat. But for the first time in a long while, he was no longer fighting alone. Ethan's cabin, once a sanctuary of quiet and solitude, now felt like a fortress under siege. The hidden cameras Marissa helped install revealed disturbing activity, unfamiliar vehicles creeping along the edges of his property, workers staking out areas near the stream, and more drones buzzing relentlessly overhead. One evening, Ethan watched in horror as a small crew arrived, armed with chainsaws and heavy equipment, intent on cutting down a row of ancient pines bordering his land. He rushed outside, shouting, but the crew ignored him, shielded by their uniforms marked with the Crest Holdings logo. He called the sheriff's office again, but by the time deputies arrived, the crew had vanished, leaving a trail of destruction and stumps where towering trees once stood. The message was clear. Crest Holdings would stop at nothing to break his resistance. Then, the HOA escalated their legal assault. Ethan received a summons for a hearing to review violations of HOA codes. The penalties were severe. Tens of thousands in fines, liens against his property, and a looming threat of forced sale. Despite Marissa's encouragement and their growing network of allies, the weight of the legal battle threatened to crush him. At the hearing, the room was cold and clinical. The HOA's representatives presented carefully curated evidence, backed by lawyers with polished arguments. Ethan's protests and counter-evidence were dismissed or ignored. But then, an unexpected witness stepped forward, a local environmental scientist who testified to the ecological value of Ethan's land and the damage Crest Holdings' plans would cause. Her testimony sowed seeds of doubt in the panel, buying Ethan time and forcing the HOA to reconsider some of their more aggressive demands. Still, the hearing ended with a warning: comply or face foreclosure. Back at the cabin, Ethan found a chilling note pinned to his door. "This isn't personal. It's business. Don't make it harder on yourself." Fear mingled with anger. The fight had become more than about land. It was a battle for survival and dignity. Marissa and the group rallied. They planned protests, reached out to local media, and launched a crowdfunding campaign to support legal fees. As public attention grew, so did the pressure on Crest Holdings. But Ethan knew the battle wasn't over. The HOA's reach was long, and their tactics ruthless. One night, as he lay awake listening to the wind through the broken trees, a shadow slipped past the edge of the property line. His dog growled low, and Ethan's heart pounded. The invaders were back, and this time, it felt like they were coming for more than just paperwork. The night was thick with tension. Ethan lay awake, every nerve alert as shadows danced beyond the broken tree line. The dog's low growl vibrated through the silence, warning of danger approaching. Suddenly, a flashlight's beam pierced the darkness, followed by muffled voices. Ethan's heart pounded. This was no routine inspection. The invaders had come for something else entirely. He grabbed his old hunting rifle, moving silently through the cabin toward the door. But before he could step outside, a voice stopped. Him cold. "Ethan, wait!" It was Marissa. She appeared in the doorway, holding up a hand. "Don't do anything rash. I've got something you need to see." Hesitant, but trusting her judgment, Ethan lowered the rifle. Marissa pulled him to her truck a few yards away, where a laptop glowed in the cab. "I hacked into their system," she whispered. "I found files showing everything. The plans to bulldoze this entire wilderness. The secret deals with politicians, the fake documents used to strong-arm holdouts." She opened a folder labeled Project Redwood. The screen displayed drone maps, blueprints for luxury resorts, and emails revealing Crest Holdings' true goal: to displace every resident and sell the land for massive profit. But the real shock was deeper. A series of encrypted messages linked Crest Holdings to a shadowy offshore company, one that was already under federal investigation for fraud and environmental crimes. "They're not just greedy," Marissa said grimly. "They're criminals." Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the leverage they needed: Together, they compiled a dossier and sent it anonymously to local reporters, environmental groups, and the Attorney General's office. The fallout was swift. News outlets exploded with stories exposing Crest Holdings' illegal schemes. Federal agents arrived in town, raiding offices and seizing documents. The HOA board members, caught in the crossfire, scrambled to distance themselves. The aggressive fines and eviction threats were suspended indefinitely. Ethan's dream home was safe for now. But the victory was bittersweet. The wilderness was scarred by Crest Holdings' initial encroachments. Trees cut, wildlife disturbed, trust shattered. Yet standing on his porch under the first light of dawn, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He and Marissa vowed to rebuild and protect the land they loved. The HOA, stripped of its power, was replaced by a community council that valued transparency and respect for nature. Ethan's battle had transformed from a personal fight into a movement, a fight for wilderness, for freedom, and for the future. As he gazed into the forest's depths, he understood that dreams could be fragile, but with courage and allies they could endure.